I noticed my son-in-law's hands the moment he walked into my kitchen that Tuesday morning. He didn't know I was watching him from the hallway. He was going through my mail. Not the junk flyers, my bank statements. I stood there for a moment, and then I walked back to my bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't say anything. I just thought about what I had seen and what it meant and how long it had probably been going on without me noticing. My name is not important. What I'm about to tell you is, I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working for the city of Edmonton, municipal infrastructure planning. Not glamorous work, but steady and honest. I retired with a decent pension, a paid-off house in the South End that I bought with my wife in 1989, and about $400,000 spread across a couple of RRSPs and a TFSA that I had been adding to since the accounts first became available. My wife passed in the spring of 2019, pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. It was very fast. It was the worst thing I have ever lived through, and I say that as a man who has lived through quite a few things. After she was gone, I rattled around this house alone for almost 2 years. My daughter, our only child, lived in Calgary with her husband. They would drive up for holidays, and occasionally I would make the trip down to see them, but mostly we stayed in touch by phone. She was busy. They were both busy. I understood. Then things changed. My daughter called me one evening in late autumn and told me that she and her husband were going through a difficult time financially. Her husband, I'll call him my son-in-law because that's what he was to me, a son-in-law and nothing more, had left his job at a logistics company after what he described as a conflict with management. She didn't give me the details. She just said they were a little behind on things, that Calgary was expensive, and that they were wondering if they could come stay with me for a while, just until they got back on their feet. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. She was my daughter. They arrived on a Friday in November with a rented cargo van and 2 SUV loads of furniture and boxes. My son-in-law had a friend with him to help carry things. The friend barely looked at me. They set up the spare room and my daughter's old room, which they converted into a kind of sitting area, and by Saturday evening my house felt like a different place entirely. In the beginning it was fine. My daughter cooked sometimes. My son-in-law fixed the gutter on the garage that had been sagging since summer. We ate dinner together a few nights a week. I thought maybe this would be good for all of us. Company in a house that had been too quiet for too long. The first thing I noticed was how often my son-in-law was on his phone. Not unusual in itself, but the way he would tilt the screen away when I walked past. The way certain conversations would stop the moment I came into the room. Small things, easy to dismiss. The second thing was a comment my son-in-law made about 3 months in. We were watching the news, some piece about interest rates in the housing market, and he said, almost to himself, "You should think about downsizing. Place like this, you could get close to 800 for it easy." I didn't respond. I picked up my mug and took a slow sip of tea and kept my eyes on the television, and I filed that sentence away in a drawer at the back of my mind. The third thing, the thing that changed everything, happened on a Wednesday afternoon in February. My daughter had been after me for weeks about seeing a doctor. She thought I seemed forgetful. She'd point to small things, a pot I'd left on the stove too long, a name I'd blanked on mid-sentence. She said she was worried. She kept using the word clarity. She'd read something, she said, about cognitive decline and how important it was to catch early. She made me an appointment with my GP without telling me first, and when I found the appointment card on the kitchen counter, I asked her about it, and she said she'd just done it because she cared. My GP is a practical woman who has known me for 11 years. She ran the standard cognitive screening, asked me the day of the week, the Prime Minister, whether I could count backward from 100 by sevens. I could. She told me afterward with some bemusement that she wasn't sure what the concern was. She said I was one of her sharpest patients. I thanked her and drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for about 10 minutes before I went inside. That evening I called my oldest friend. We had worked together for 20 years and stayed close after he retired. He is a careful, methodical man, and he had a son who had gone through a difficult divorce a few years earlier, so he had some experience navigating things that I had not. He answered on the second ring, and I told him what had been happening. I didn't frame it dramatically. I just laid it out the way I would lay out a site report. The bank statements, the comment about selling the house, the doctor's appointment, the conversations that stopped. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "Don't tell them anything. Don't sign anything. And call a lawyer before the end of the week." I called a lawyer on Thursday morning. She was an estate lawyer with an office in a tower downtown, referred to me by my friend. I sat across from her desk and I explained my situation, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her pen down and said, "What you're describing is a recognizable pattern. I've seen it before. The question is what you want to do about it, and how much documentation you have." I had very little documentation at that point. She told me what to look for. She told me how to protect myself. She told me that as long as I was mentally competent, and I was clearly, no one could make decisions about my assets without my authorization. She also told me that people try anyway, and that the best defense was to restructure things proactively, quietly, without announcing it to anyone. I left her office with a list and a plan. Over the next 6 weeks, I moved carefully. I updated my will. I established a formal power of attorney with my friend as the named attorney in the event I ever genuinely became incapacitated. I changed the beneficiary designations on my RRSPs and TFSA. I opened a new account at a different financial institution and began directing my pension deposits there. I shredded the old statements and started receiving everything electronically, with a new email address that existed only on my phone. I did all of this while living in the same house, having dinner with them, asking about their day. It was a very strange 6 weeks. The tension in the house had been building in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. My son-in-law was home almost all the time now, still officially looking for work, and he had taken to spending long stretches in the guest room with the door closed. My daughter had become a different kind of attentive, overly solicitous in a way that felt rehearsed. She would bring me tea I hadn't asked for. She would hover near me when I took my blood pressure medication, commenting on how many pills I had. She asked me once casually who my doctor had consulted when she ran all those tests. I told her it had just been a regular checkup. She nodded slowly. "It's just you've seemed a little off to me, Dad. I want to make sure you're really okay." I looked at her, this woman who had been my daughter for 39 years, who I had driven to hockey practice in the dark at 6 in the morning, who I had helped move into her first apartment, who had sobbed in my arms at her mother's funeral, and I smiled and told her I was fine. Never better. That night I called my lawyer and told her to accelerate the timeline. The next thing that happened I was not expecting. I came home from an errand early on a Saturday afternoon. I had gone to pick up a prescription, but the pharmacy wait was longer than usual, so I left without it, meaning to go back later. I pulled into the driveway, let myself in through the side door into the kitchen, and I could hear voices from the hallway. My son-in-law on the phone, door to the guest room half open. I stood in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen, but the house was quiet and he wasn't speaking quietly. "She keeps stalling. He won't budge on the property discussion, he just changes the subject." "Yeah, I know, but we need access to the account before we can." "No, she's working on getting him to sign something. Power of attorney or the joint thing, one or the other." A pause. "If it drags past spring, we're in trouble. Mitch isn't going to wait forever." I set my keys down on the counter very gently and walked back out the side door. I sat in my car and I breathed. I thought about Mitch, whoever that was, and what it meant that he was part of this conversation, and what wouldn't wait past spring. I thought about joint accounts and power of attorney, and getting him to sign something. I thought about my daughter's voice, the practiced warmth in it. I thought about how much I had loved her, how much I still loved her, in the bewildered and diminished way you love someone after they have revealed themselves to you as a stranger. Then I composed myself and I drove back to the pharmacy to get my prescription. When I got home, I said nothing. I made dinner. I asked my son-in-law how his job applications were going. He said there were a few leads. I passed him the salt. That week I had a second meeting with my lawyer, and I told her what I had heard. She made notes. She asked if I had any way to document it, recording or otherwise. I told her that Alberta's laws on recording allowed one party to consent, and that party could be me. She suggested I look into it further with that understanding in mind. I bought a small digital recorder the following day. I did not use it recklessly. I was not trying to build a criminal case. I simply wanted to be able to demonstrate, if it ever came to it, that what I had heard was real and that I had not imagined it. I didn't have to wait long. It was my daughter who gave me the clearest evidence, as it turned out. Not my son-in-law. Her. She came to me one evening when he was out, and she sat down at the kitchen table across from me with a folder. Inside the folder were papers. A document she said a financial advisor had recommended, something to do with simplifying asset management for older homeowners, making things easier for the estate down the road. She pushed it across the table toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I looked at the first page. It was not an estate simplification document. It was a request to add a joint owner to the title of my house. I picked it up, I read it slowly, I set it down. Then I looked at my daughter and I said gently, "Who prepared this?" She said a name I didn't recognize. I said, "Is this person a licensed notary? A lawyer?" She hesitated. "A financial consultant. It's standard, Dad. It just makes everything smoother in case something happens to you." I nodded. I told her I'd need to have my own lawyer look at it first, standard practice. I hoped she understood. Her expression shifted, just for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes that I did not like seeing. She said, "Of course, no rush. She just thought I'd want to take care of things while I was still sharp." While I was still sharp. I thanked her and said good night and went to my room, and I sat with my hands on my knees in the dark for a long time. I called my lawyer in the morning. She had the document reviewed by the end of the day. She called me back that evening and used the word fraudulent twice in the first minute. The consultant isn't registered with any recognized body in Alberta, she said. This document, if you'd signed it, would have given your daughter full joint ownership of your property, including the right to force a sale. It's not standard, it's not legal in the way it's been presented. And it tells me that whoever is advising them knows enough to be dangerous but not quite enough to cover their tracks. I asked her how she wanted to proceed. She said she had a colleague who worked with the Edmonton Police Service on financial exploitation cases involving seniors. She said she would like to make an introduction if I was agreeable. I was agreeable. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I continued living in my house, eating meals, watching the evening news, asking about job leads that did not exist. I went to 2 meetings I was not supposed to talk about. I answered questions carefully and honestly. I handed over the recording I had made, which my lawyer had already reviewed for admissibility purposes. I handed over the fraudulent document, which still had my daughter's fingerprints on it. My lawyer filed an application to have both names removed from my emergency contact information at my GP's office and at the hospital where I had a routine cardiology follow-up every 18 months. A precaution, she said. I didn't ask her to elaborate. On a Thursday morning in late March, I woke up early. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with my mug, and I looked at the backyard, which still had snow on it, the heavy, wet kind that comes just before spring. A pair of chickadees were working the feeder I had put up the previous fall. My wife's old feeder, the red one with the pitched roof. My daughter came downstairs at 8:30. She poured herself coffee. She sat down across from me. We talked for a few minutes about nothing, the weather, whether the snow would be gone by the weekend. Then a vehicle pulled up in front of the house. I won't describe what happened next in detail. I will say that it was quiet and orderly, and that my son-in-law came downstairs in the middle of it and said nothing at all, which told me that he understood immediately what was happening. My daughter said my name. Once, in a way I will not forget as long as I live. I didn't look away from her. I wanted her to see that I wasn't angry, I wasn't frightened, I wasn't confused, I was just done. My friend arrived at 9 o'clock as we had arranged. He helped me carry 3 bags and a box of things I had already packed out to his truck. The house would need to be dealt with later properly through the proper channels. But I was not going to spend another night in it. We drove to his place on the other side of the city. His wife made scrambled eggs and put the kettle on and didn't ask me a single question that morning, which was exactly right. The legal process took months, the way these things do. The fraudulent document, the recording, the financial records my lawyer's team had assembled. It was enough. My son-in-law had a connection to a man named Mitch who turned out to have a prior record for elder financial exploitation in British Columbia. That context mattered. My daughter cooperated eventually after her own lawyer told her that cooperation was her best option. I sold the house in June, not because I was forced to, and not because I couldn't have stayed. I sold it because I had lived there with my wife for 30 years, and the person it had become under those last months was not a place I wanted to go back to. I got $812,000 for it, which was more than my son-in-law had predicted, which gave me a small, quiet satisfaction. I bought a condo in a building near the river valley, 4 floors up, big windows facing west. In the evenings, the light comes in and turns everything the color of old honey. I have a small balcony where I put up a new bird feeder in the fall, same style as the old one, red roof, pitched. A few weeks after I moved in, I drove out to one of the provincial parks east of the city. I had my wife's old hiking boots in the back of the car, the ones she wore every summer we went to Jasper. I walked a trail we used to walk together. I sat on a flat rock near a creek and I ate a sandwich and I watched the water go past, and I did not think about documents or accounts or the sound of my daughter's voice saying my name in that hallway. I thought about the chickadees on the feeder. I thought about the spring we bought the house. How we painted the kitchen yellow on a weekend, because my wife had always wanted a yellow kitchen, and it looked terrible. In the end, the wrong shade entirely, and we laughed for about 2 hours straight trying to fix it. I thought about how much of a life fits into a house, and how much of a life you can carry with you when you leave. I drove home in the evening, windows down, and for the first time in longer than I could clearly remember, the road ahead of me felt like it was only mine.